You're having a great day. So, what we're going to do today, so today, as you know, is Tuesday is live writing day. So, what I want to do today is I want to pick up on our last live writing session where we're doing this figure for a paper on volunteer leadership. And I want to show you how I move from this figure to the final figure in the paper and use that as an opportunity to give you more tips about drawing figures. For me, drawing figures is really important because a good figure shows your theoretical contribution. If you can draw a figure with your theoretical contribution, that's basically the equivalent of explaining your theoretical contribution to a lay person. And that means you have a clear and visible and very specific theoretical contribution. Now, that may not be enough for reviewers, but nevertheless, it is clear whatever it is you are doing, okay? So let's look at the figure that I did on Thursday with you guys. You know, obviously, I'm never going to be like a genius in live writing in 15 minutes because I'm not a smart person. I'm not a genius. That means that I need time to work, okay? So but I think there is some use in looking at the process and trying to understand what could be improved, okay? So basically, this was a very initial step to come up with the final figure where I have, and it is a bit of a cop-out if it was the final figure, but it is a very useful first step when you're thinking, right? So what we have here on top is a summary of the literature, okay? And what we have here on the bottom is a summary of my paper, okay? So, sorry about that. And so basically the argument here is that, these are two specifications of a model that depend on how volunteers interpret leisure. So I could just do that, right? So I could just, if you see this is I'm going to zoom this in, okay? This is basically the same variable whether volunteers interpret volunteer work as serious leisure or not. So depending on the value of that variable, yes or no, or a lot or a little, then we would have this model A, which is the current literature for not or a little. So volunteers do not really see volunteer work as serious leisure, or this my new model, okay? So, okay, that's a first step. Now, basically we would have two separate models. The theoretical contribution would be this new model that is different from this one. Okay. The problem here is that the old model is not part of the new model. So I'm basically presenting my paper in opposition to current theory. If you have seen my video on standing on the shoulders of giants, you know that's not a good idea, okay? So I'll show you what I did at the end of the paper. And basically my process was I redrew this top model of the current literature and then found a way of keeping it, let's say, inside the other model, that the new model of volunteer work as serious leisure that I developed in the paper, okay? So let's look at it. Good. So here is the final model. Oh, and I want to show you, wait, before we go there, I want to show you, okay. Well, actually, I wanted to show you the process of drawing this, but this is like I did it by hand before doing it on Word, just because A, this is super quicker, and B, this allows me to sort of like summarize things. Now, I didn't do it on Scalpel because I felt that I needed even more freedom than what Scalpel allows in drawing. So I just decided to do it here. Okay, so basically what I did is I said, okay, at the core of the process that I'm looking at are actions, so leadership, actions to improve volunteer performance, and actually, just correcting that, sorry, and actions to improve volunteer retention, okay? Retention, there you go. Okay, I'm happy I did this with you guys because otherwise this would be an error that I would just have seen after submitting the paper. So anyway, so actions to improve performance, actions to improve retention, and then retention and effectiveness, okay? And basically what I did is I just summarized my theory section with 2 dimensions here, 2 dimensions here, and then basically a set of arrows that I numbered because, you know, in the paper you don't just want to put, you know, see figure 1 without explaining, so I do explain each of these arrows. So as you can see, improving volunteer performance has a negative effect on retention, improving volunteer retention has a positive effect on retention, and then basically the idea is that retention will somehow improve organizational effectiveness. That's a summary of the literature, okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to show my contribution, I want to keep these variables, but show a new relationship between them, okay? That's what I want to do, okay? So here is my model. So we keep these actions and we keep these outcomes, see? So we keep the actions and we keep the outcomes, okay? Now, what I'm doing, however, is I'm saying that actions to improve, that there's this cycle, which I call the self-development cycle, that includes both actions to improve volunteer performance and actions to improve volunteer retention. Exactly, okay? And there are specific steps in this cycle that affect effectiveness and that affect retention, okay? So I keep the difference, so I don't say, okay, this is like this whole cycle improves effectiveness. No, I specify which elements of the cycle do this, and I establish this relationship of mutual constitution between the variables, which obviously are explained in the text of the article, okay? So basically, my strategy here was different from the strategy that I discussed in the previous video on how to do figures. In the previous video of how to do figures, I keep one specification and I extend it with my research, with my data. In this model, I keep the variables, but I specify a new relationship between those variables. So here, not independent relationships, but a relationship of mutual constitution. Here, not an effect of volunteer retention on effectiveness, but separate effects from different parts, different steps of this cycle, okay? So, you know, if you want, that's a new way, a new type or a new genre of figure building for papers, instead of having the existing model and then adding sort of variables and arrows and having a bigger model, a more expensive model that adds new things to the literature. I keep the same variables, but I specify a new relationship between those variables, okay? And so this is more of an alternative model in the literature, but one that, you know, keeps the constructs that the literature recognizes, but says, okay, there's this cycle around those constructs that that is an alternative explanation. Okay, so I hope this was useful. once I have this, this is the second revision for the paper, so fingers crossed for a smaller sort of minor revision cycle next time. But you know, I'm happy with how it looks, and I hope you enjoyed this short and brief discussion on figures. Remember, once you have your figure, you have your contribution. So maybe it's an interesting way to write. Instead of trying to draw an outline, try to start by having a figure of the theory section and the figure of the discussion section, and see, you know, does this make sense? Is this a contribution? Yes or no? Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. I'll catch you guys. I'll catch you guys on the stream tomorrow. Until then, I hope you have a great time. Bye bye.